Beautiful people.
Good afternoon and welcome to the 2025 Michigan Jazz Festival. This is our 30th anniversary of the festival and we're so glad that you're all here to help us celebrate it. This is the Jazz Talk stage and we have presentations and interviews all day long with interesting jazz people about current and historical jazz in the Detroit metropolitan area. This stage is sponsored by David and Jeanette Sharp, and I want to thank them for their donation that allows us to do this. My name is Mike Whiting, and I'm the MC for this program, and I'm representing the Michigan Jazz Festival and the Greater Detroit Jazz Society. Our guest this hour is none other than R J Spangler, the founder and leader of the Planet Net, who I'm sure many of you are familiar with. Our interviewer is Mr. George Sinnott, and I'll start with RJ. As I said, he's one of the founders of Planet Net, a renowned nationally and internationally recording jazz band. It's affectionately known in Detroit as the Down and Dirty Swing Band, and they do everything marvelously from King Oliver, Fats Waller, to the swing of Ellington, and Basie, right on up to the jive of Louis Jordan. These guys are fabulous. They're winners of the, the Michigan, the Michigan Best Jazz Group Award, I said that wrong, and also Best Jazz Recording Award a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
And they are something else. They're terrific. Our interviewer is none other than George Sinnott, who owns several successful businesses in the Detroit area. But those are just his hobby. His real passion is music, and he is the lead saxophonist for the Stardusters big band, plays with several other bands. And his other hobby is as an interviewer on local TV programs. George has interviewed everybody and anybody who is a jazz feature figure in the Detroit area. He's really very good at it. I'd ask you now to turn off your cell phones. Okay? I would remind you and ask you to visit our Give 5 to Keep It Alive desks, because this event, this festival is free, but it's not cheap. And we need your donations and your support to keep it going. And while you're there, if you would fill out a survey before you leave, tell us what you liked and didn't like about it, and we take them very seriously. Should turn up on the cell phone. Anyway, without any further blather from me, I'll turn it over to George.
You answered the phone call, right? Welcome, R J Spangler, ladies and gentlemen. RJ, we're going to start right way back at the beginning.
Yes.
About your interest in music.
Yes.
When did you actually start getting interested in music?
I got my first drum set when I was 10 years old. It was a Japanese Starlight drum set, and paid my parents for it. Probably a $100 drum set, I was watching Ringo Starr on TV, and Buddy Rich, and the TV drummers that you'd see as a little boy in 1965, when I was a little kid, and yeah, I like that. My uncle was a jazz drummer.
Okay.
So I'd see him packing up his drums and going to gigs, and I thought he was really cool.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
So your first band, so your first gigs then, when did they start? Was they start whether you were in high school or were you?
Yeah, thereabouts, yeah. But by the time I got out of high school, I grew up in Grosse Pointe, Michigan.
Okay.
And in high school, I started meeting kids from Detroit, from Jefferson Chalmers neighborhood, which is adjacent to Grosse Pointe. And there was lots of kids moving to, Rod had a whole thing before us here about white flight and everything. And there's a lot of kids that moved to Grosse Pointe from the next neighborhood over in Grosse Pointe, Detroit, Jefferson Chalmers. And they were musicians like me. And also, this is pre-big box stores, music stores. We didn't have Guitar Center when I was a kid.
Right.
We had a store on Mack Avenue and the Detroit side of Mac. There's Grosse Pointe and there's Detroit. Right there was a store called Fiddler's Music, and that's where I took drum lessons from a guy there, and he taught me how to play the rock beat and all that stuff. And at that store, you could meet all kinds of musicians in the neighborhood. Kids from Detroit, kids from Harper Woods, kids from St. Clair Shores, and other kids from Grosse Pointe. So I started meeting these kids in Detroit, and so like when I got out of high school, I moved to Jefferson Chalmers, like as soon as I could.
Really?
And I started playing in bands with kids from Detroit, and I started meeting sometimes older guys too, because Detroit was a great melting pot of musicians back in, this would be 1975, 76, 77, so and so forth.
Right.
So you see this is my first picture up there? Is it gone? Or is it just you and it's us? Probably watching us. But if you can put the first picture up that says Coomba, that's it. That was really my first band. And you see that's me in the back right there, kind of moody looking guy with the curly hair, next to the guy with a hat in the back row wearing the plaid shirt. That's James O'Donnell in the plaid shirt. You guys know James O'Donnell, anybody out here? I know you do. Yeah, and I know you do. James O'Donnell was probably 16 or 17 years old in this picture. And next to him was Musa Abdul Malik holding the trumpet. He was 35. Next to him was Rick Steiger, and he and I are the same age. He was also from Grosse Pointe. He and I kind of helped put this band together. Below him was our bass player, Dave Springer, who was a white kid from Detroit. He went to Finney High School. Next to him, down below, you see the little black kid, that's Akunda Hollis. I still make music with Akunda to this day. Up above him is that was our drummer, Sule Neal. His dad was sort of a well-regarded, well-known black artist here in Detroit. Sule grew up with people like Roy Brooks and Teddy Harris hanging out at their house. And Sule was part of the jazz scene in Detroit. He was just 2 or 3 years older than me. But next to him was a guy named Arnold Clarington. We called him Jabbar, and he was our musical director. He was 36, and he played baritone sax. And next to him was Fred Bergman, and Fred would come from the west side of Detroit to rehearse with us 3 times a week. And next to him was Tim Mitchum, the alto sax player, the black kid. And above him was Gary Lane, Gary Lane used to have a classical radio show on WQRS. Remember WQRS?
Sure.
Yeah. He was a classical professional classical radio presenter on the radio, but he liked jazz, and he played sort of amateur jazz with us. And we were working on this music together, learning how to play together. And we practiced 3 days a week with this band, and we played like in the street at art shows and art fairs and things like that, and just things to get going. And we had these 2 older guys there that were, one of them wrote the charts for us, and we would play some standards like Take the A Train and that kind of thing too.
Sure.
But then they would write kind of like modal tunes in 5/4 and yeah. So that's what we were working on. And this is probably 1977, I would guess.
So what was your next band after that one?
Well, hold on. Let's go to one of the pictures that says Kumba Live.
Okay.
This is, you can see this. This is the same group of guys. We've added even more guys to that picture. And you can see there's James in the middle with wearing a beret now. And a lot of the same guys. I'm in the back here, we're playing timbales. And we have, I think Kurt Crocky's in that picture now over there. And there's Paul Carey, who we went to high school with in Grosse Pointe. And there's Gary Lane over there in front on trombone. And there's John Paxton on T-bone with a beard. And Dan Matuzak. And there's the same alto player, Tim Mitchum, and Rick Steiger. And there's Sule on drums.
Can you change the picture?
Oh, yes, I'll change the picture. Yeah, it's the one that says Kumba Live. I'm sorry. Yes, it's the title Kumba Live. I think you got it. That's it. Yeah, there you go. So you see, it's a lot of the same guys. The band's even bigger now. But now you've got Kurt Karanke. So now we're probably about 1982, 81, somewhere in there. Kurt was out of Berkeley School of Music and playing with us.
Okay.
Yeah.
So who's doing the charts again?
Jabbar.
Okay.
Okay, now let's go to the one where it says James and RJ at captains. I'll let you get the picture up before I start blathering. Good word. All right, this is James and I, 1978, playing a little bar gig at a little place we had every Sunday night in a bar called Captain's 2 on Mack Avenue on the Detroit side of Mack and Grosse Pointe. That's me and James playing trumpet. Look how young we are. Is that hilarious or what? You know, look at that, huh? So that was us then, and that by 1980 we changed to the Sun Messenger. So let's go over let's go to when it says Sun Mess Lou B.
Now, the Sun Messengers was a great group.
Yeah, this is.
I heard those guys play at the. Did you used to do
We played
basketball games at?
Yeah, that was after I left the group. I put my own band. I started that band with Rich Steiger, and yeah, there you go. Bob missed this day, but Bob right here was a member of the group then, and you see there's Paul on guitar, there's Steve on percussion, Dan was in that last picture. There's Akunda, there's Rick, there's James, me, T-Bone, Kurt, and that older gentleman right there on sax is Lou Barnett. Now here I was about 25 and Lou was 65. And Lou had played with Aretha Franklin, he had played with Billie Holiday, he had played with all these great people, and we would play like Body and Soul with him, and he sounded like Coleman Hawkins.
Oh wow!
And to be 25 years old, and to play like, you know, Bob was a drummer back then, but sometimes I would play a couple tunes a night with him, and to play that tune, to feel that, you know what I'm talking about, Bob? Remember Lou Barnett, that energy that he played, to hear that, because you know, you'd hear those old scratchy records, but to hear a guy from that era who could really deliver the goods of that type of, and I really, because I was a modern jazz guy, thinking about Train and all that stuff, now I'm like, oh no, man. You gotta love the whole thing. You can't just love modern jazz. You gotta love all of it. It's all for us, man. You can't just dig one part of this thing, because all this music is so cool and so hip. So Lou really got me, you know, digging on that. So let's look at another picture. Huh?
Which one are you?
I have curly hair in the back.
All right, all that hair.
I had a lot of hair. I had a full head of hair at 40, 45, kaput. Sunmess 45 RPM. And thank you for doing this. What's your name, bro?
Zach.
Jack?
Zach.
Zach with a Z. Thank you. Zach, you're doing a great job here. Yeah. Okay. Bob is in this picture. So you see, this is our first recording. This is about 1982. You can see which is me there, the kind of chubby guy in the far left-hand corner. And there's T-Bone Paxton. Again, that's damn it too, Zach. There's Kurt Kroenke. There's kind of slim Kurt Kroenke. Red. Kurt's cousin is here today, folks, over there in the back. And there's Bob Sweet right there next to him, who's with us today. And behind him is Paul Carey. And behind him is Kurt Ellenberger, who's a professor of music now over in the west side of the state. And next to him is Rick Steiger. And behind him is Don Swindell, who went on to be a personality, a radio personality at WJZZ,
Right.
and it was a hell of a trumpeter. We were working a lot. Here you show, we used to play this place, Elvin's. Elvin's Fine Art Deli was over on Cass Corridor by Wayne State. And we would play that place, and on that dance floor, Lance, you remember what I'm talking about, there would be people dancing who were 21 and 65, all on the same dance floor. There was no ageism back then when I was coming up as a young musician. People came out to bars to hear music, and it didn't matter, you just came out to hear music. You know, especially for jazz and that kind of music, or blues, people came out to hear music, George. You know,
Right.
and so you'd be your professor from Wayne and the students from Wayne, all in the same bar, all listening to the same music.
Yeah.
And we could make $1,000 to $1.50 at the door, $5 a head. Think how many people had to come through the door any given Friday night or Saturday night of the year. And that was not just that bar. We could do that type of money at Galligan's. We could make that money at Rick's American Cafe in Ann Arbor, in Lansing, at Club Soda in Kalamazoo, at Interchange in Grand Rapids, at two different clubs in Traverse City, But plus we would play at rooms in Chicago and Toronto and occasional trips to Ohio. You know, I mean, back then you could have a 10-piece band and you could do okay, you know. But look at all these people and all these cool bands, and those were all our colleagues. We knew all those guys and all those bands. Now let's go to the one that says Sun Mess Leon Thomas. That's kind of a cool one. Here we go. It says Leon Thomas, Wendell Harrison, and Sun Messengers. Here we are at St. Andrews Hall, and we did a bunch of gigs. And Lance, you were there for this, right? We played a bunch of gigs back up. Leon Thomas. Anybody remember Leon Thomas? He sang The Creator Is a Master Plan with Pharoah Sanders. Mm-hmm. So we did a series of gigs around Michigan, backing him up, which was kind of a feather in a cap back in those days. So that's moving on from this. I was at Sun Messengers until I was 35 years old, and by the time I hit 35, and then I named that band. You know, I found that band with Rick Steiger, and I loved all those guys. We had great times, but I got to 35 and I realized they is a big band, and Rick had figured out how to make money paying all these mouths to feed, playing weddings and private parties, and they could all play the gig and be, you know, done by midnight and home, you know. And they were all, by this time, a lot of these guys were getting married. And
where the money is, right?
Yeah, yeah. And I was 35 and I thought, I still want to play for people, you know. I still want to play in a bar where I might meet some girls and,
sure.
and have a couple drinks. But I want to play for an audience that came to hear music,
yeah.
Not just play at a wedding where I'm just something in the background music.
Right.
You know what I mean? I want to play music that counted. I want to make records that people, you know, bought, and so I started. I moved into another direction, and I started playing with a guy named Johnny Bassett. So this was a group that I founded, really. I found Johnny Bassett playing. I saw him one time at the Detroit Jazz Festival. He was a guitar player in the back row of a group. That is organist named Ben Baber. He was a blind organist playing at the Detroit Jazz Festival. And he says, I'm going to bring my guitar player up to do a blues. And Johnny comes up behind all these sax players they had in front. And he came up and he sang his blues. And I thought, what the hell is this guy? Never heard of this guy. You know? And I asked Jim Gallagher to give me his number because I knew he knew Ben Baber. So he got the number from me and I called him up and said, hey, would you like to meet up with me when we could talk about doing some gigs maybe? So we did. We met up and I booked a little gig at a bar near my house and with a band I put together with some friends of mine. And it went over real well, and I put a band together around him, of my friends. And look how many gigs we're doing in December of 1995. You see how busy we were? And I booked all those gigs, of course, you know. And I kept us busy like that for years, right, Hollywood? Yeah, I kept us busy like that for years. And I was able to get us signed to record labels in Europe, the Netherlands, a label in Detroit too, a label in New York City, a really good label in Minneapolis. You know, and these labels would pay us to make records. One record, we made one record in Memphis that was produced by Willie Mitchell, who was Al Green's producer. You know, I mean, those records sold 25,000 units. You know, somebody sold 10,000 units. We were selling records, and I would go on tour with them. We would tour all across the United States. One month we played Portland, Oregon, and Portland, Maine, the same month.
Is that right?
Oh yeah, running around in the van. You know, we were touring Europe. We toured every province that bordered on America in Canada in 1 month.
Okay.
You know, 8 provinces. We had them all.
Now, who booked all those gigs? Did you book those gigs, or do you have an agent?
I had 2 agents in Canada. I had an agent in Europe. But the first tour of Europe, I booked a month-long tour of Europe. I booked myself, my very first one. But by the time I came home from that tour of Europe, I had a record deal in Europe and I had an agent in Europe.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, but I booked that first tour myself. And I took a 6-piece band that included Dwight Adams on trumpet, Chris Kodesh on organ.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, and a lot of these guys, like, you know, these guys, their first tours are out of Detroit for a lot of the musicians. This is a long time ago for a lot of these guys, you know.
Yeah.
I get excited talking about all this stuff, as you can see, it's important to me, you know? So, yeah, here, let's go to another picture here. Let's go to Johnny Bassett Live. Now, this is us playing in Chatham, Ontario. We would play to this club every 3 months. And there's Chris Kodish on organ, there's Johnny, that's me on drums. You see how much hair I have? See how slim I was a handsome MF, too. That's how I looked when Hollywood met me. And that's Dwight Adams on trumpet. And that's Keith Kaminsky on sax. Keith went on to play for 15, 20 years with Bob Seger's horn section. And I put that band together. I hired all those guys. None of them knew each other before I hired them to be in that band. None of them.
Oh.
None of them. None of them. None of them had never met each other in life before I put this band together. And I booked that band all over the place. Let's go to Joe Weaver Poconos. And that's Joe Weaver. Joe was Johnny's best pal from high school. And they played together in bands in high school, and they recorded, as Rod was talking about before me here, about Black Bottom and Paradise Valley, and they recorded at what were we talking about? Joe Von Battle's record shop on Hastings Street, and Joe was over there, and Joe was a house band over at Fortune Records, and this is all very historic stuff here in Detroit. Joe was a band leader in the very first touring bands for Motown, and he was, one time I was at the Detroit Music Awards and with Joe, and we went over and talked to the Funk Brothers, and they were so happy to see him, and they all told me, they said, Joe, RJ, if it wasn't for Joe Weaver, we would never have the Funk Brothers. We all played in his band before we became the Funk Brothers. We all learned how to playing with Joe Weaver.
Really?
Yeah, Joe was an incredibly beautiful cat. Was the nicest people you ever met in your life. He could sing the blues, he could sing R&B, and he was a piano player. And he left music after his 20s to raise his 3 daughters because his wife had left. Okay. And he wanted to take care of his daughters. He got a job at Ford Motor Company as a high-low driver. He did for 30 years. And I came along just at a time when he was retired. And him and I went across the United States playing concerts together and through Europe. I took him on numerous tours of Europe, and he and I had the best time together. He was the nicest guy, and I miss him to this day. He was just the most beautiful cat. That was my friend Joe Weaver. I loved Joe Weaver. Alberta Adams. She was one of the great singers of Hastings Street and Black Bottom and all that, and also for many, many years I managed her career. That was, coming out of this thing I did with Johnny Bassett, I started meeting these people. Like, she came to me one day at a multiple band show I was doing with all these singers and blues guys, and she said, RJ, I want you to be my manager. And I said, well, Famous Coachman's managing you. She goes, I don't care, I want you. And I said to Coachman, who was a friend of mine, you guys might remember Famous Coachman's a well-known Detroit DJ, and we were friendly, and I said, I don't want to, Coachman, Alberta, and she said, RJ, you take Alberta and do what you can for her. I want her to do okay, And Alberta and I, again, she never wanted to get a passport to fly because she hated flying. But we turned down more gigs in Europe than you could shake a stick at. But we played all over the United States and Canada together, and we had some good times. We made, this is a really good record. Dwight's on this one. Walter White's playing trumpet on this one. Of course, Johnny Bassett's on it. My friend Bill Hyde. It is a great, we made some really nice records with Alberta Adams, and she was just an incredible person, and she was my friend. And stood by me through thick and thin, because your life, it's not always great things that happen. Like, you go through life. This is my 50th year since high school, and I've been in this business all this time, and there's been good times and bad times. You've seen it. There's tough times sometimes in this business. It's tough times. And Joe and Alberta, they stood by me through all of it. They were the salt of the earth, and I love them so much, and I miss them both very much. A little verklempt. Anyway, let's move on to where's the Alberta gig. There's me. I'm about 40 here, starting to pick a little weight. We're playing a festival. That's her. Yep. She was an incredible lady, let me tell you right now. I just loved her so much. Now, let's go to one is Eddie Kirkland. Eddie Kirkland was a guy who toured playing guitar with John Lee Hooker, and he toured under his own name and was a heck of a blues guitar guy. Holly was talking to me the other day about a story, reminding me of a story. He toured on his own, you know, in a car. He would never go on the freeway. He always take the side roads. And there was some big gentleman who was not gentleman, less than gentleman. He was terrorizing people at rest stops, robbing them. And Eddie Kirkland was 5 foot nothing, but he'd been a boxer. And this guy encountered Eddie Kirkland. Eddie Kirkland subdued this guy and held him till the police came. You know, really? When he was 80 years old. Oh, wow. Eddie Kirkland was quite a character. Yeah, okay, this is a band I had. You see there's Skeeto and Johnny Bassett and me and Bob Connor and Johnny Evans, great saxophone player, a friend of mine. And now we're back at a guy named Eddie Bowe. Eddie Bowe was he's a great New Orleans piano player. He'd come up to Detroit without a band, and I would back him up. I was his band leader in Detroit, and he made a bunch of really good records. He was sort of like Alan Toussaint, Alan Toussaint out there, or Fess Longhair, that kind of thing. Well, he was that. He was a great, New Orleans R&B guy that would come up north without a band, and I had sort of the Eddie Bowe franchise for a lot of years. We played festivals in Lansing and Detroit and so forth, backing him up, and he was a really great guy. And I remember one time we were playing a gig up in Lansing, and a lady came up there. She booked this thing called the Festival Acadian out in Cajun country, and it was all Louisiana music. And she said Eddie played it every year for her, and she said, RJ, your band is way better than Eddie's New Orleans band. I really want to bring you guys out there to back him up, because you guys do a better job than his own guys do. And I said, well, let's do it. She goes, nah, it's got to be all Louisiana musicians in this event, No one wants to see some Detroit guys. But, she said, I wish I could do it, because you guys just have a better band. And we did. We had a really good band. Skeeto Valdez is a fantastic drummer, We really had something going on there.
Yeah, that's it.
I was about 35, and this was before Johnny Bassett, actually. My friend Paul Carey had a band, and I was playing drums here. And we were playing at this place called Mahoney's, which is a few blocks from my house in Detroit. I lived for 30 years in Detroit, and then 10 years ago I moved back to Grosse Pointe, where I live now. But that was that's a hand-drawn postcard. That's me, my handwriting there. When it showed what we're doing at Mahoney's, we were playing there like 3 nights a week at this little club. And I was about 35 years old at this point in life, which is.
RJ,
I'm 68. I'll be 69 in November, just to give you kind of a gauge of what's going on. Yeah, he taught me a lot. He was a guy who really. He really, he saw I was paying attention to what he was doing, and that's what I always say to people when they're on a gig with Bill. I always kind of give them, say, you do these certain things, and he'll know that you're paying attention, and he'll start teaching you more. And there's a way to learn from Bill, because he wants to teach you how to be better at this music. He really knows it. Bill really knows this music, and we still every year we play a gig or two together, because he lives out by DC now, and he really took me under his wing. This is a record we made together, one of many, and we've produced a lot of records together, and we've toured across Europe together, and we've done a lot of tours down south together, and he's just a special, special guy in my life. So just to try and move things along here, and then here's the other one, says Sinclair. That's me about age 41, I'd guess, with one of my great mentors, John Sinclair. And does anybody know John Sinclair out here?
Sure.
A few of you. John Sinclair was a famous political radical. Did you know John Sinclair?
No.
He was a famous 60s, 70s political radical from, made his name maybe in Ann Arbor, but he managed the MC5. He was a political prisoner for marijuana. But he founded the Ann Arbor Blues and Jazz Festival. He kind of helped make Ann Arbor a big roots music mecca. Yeah.
I got a John Sinclair story. You guys were playing at Rec Bowl once,
Yeah,
and we were sitting, they had these tables lined up like this,
yeah.
and John Sinclair came walking in.
Yeah, he came to he was looking for me.
He sat down in front of us, and he was all hunched over, and I said to Marilyn, I think he's doing coke. So I walked down and looked.
Was he?
And no, he was doing a crossword puzzle.
Oh, okay. John did weird stuff, no question about it. But he was a mentor to me. John was one of these guys who, you know, he knew my Uncle Bud. And my Uncle Bud was a great jazz drummer. He was a jazz radio personality. You know how today Don has this radio show on WDET. He bases his radio show, and he'll tell anybody this, on listening to my uncle's radio show in the 70s on WDET. My uncle brought public radio to WDET, and my uncle was a great broadcaster. You heard Jim Gallert here earlier today, some of you, and many of you know Jim Gallert. Jim had a radio show called Jazz yesterday. The bookend show was Jazz Today with Bud Spangler, and Bud Spangler hired Jim Gallert at WDET. My uncle Bud was an incredible world-class broadcaster who spent most of his life in San Francisco, where he ran stations out there, and then, you know, he also had a signature jazz series that he booked, and he was, by the time he died, he was the #1 producer of jazz recordings, and he was one of my great mentors in life too. Because of my Uncle Bud, Sinclair kind of took me under his wing as a young man, a very young man. 18, 19 years old, I was hanging out with Sinclair and learning about this music, and so I just trying to put my mentors in here, you know. Bill Hyde and John Sinclair are definitely my mentors. Let's go to the one that says pioneers. Going back to Joe Weaver, this is a group I put together with Joe, Stanley Mitchell, and Kenny Martin, and this is sort of a R&B doo-wop group of guys who all recorded together separately on little Detroit and East Coast R&B labels before Motown existed. Kenny Martin, the little guy in the end, recorded the first song ever written by Berry Gordy. Yeah, and these guys were great entertainers. And the guy in the middle recorded for Chess Records in Chicago, which is, you know, the label of Muddy Waters and you know, Chuck Berry, all those guys, right? They all had great careers. Now you see the guy in the back there on bass, that's Tim Marks. Tim Marks was my bass player for a couple of years there. Tim Marks went on to play bass on every Taylor Swift recording. All of them. I have had a great run of bass players. After Tim Marks, later on I had Noah Jackson, who you'll see around here at this festival, and Noah went on to play bass, and he still does, with a great South African artist named Abdullah Ibrahim. He's one of the world's great South African artists. And Noah is his bass player, still to this day. And then after that I had India Owens. So you'll see, if you go to art fairs around Detroit, you'll see this print of me and T-Bone and India and Matt, my guitar player, playing, and she's this African-American woman playing this bass with a dress on. She's the bass player in the Stephen Colbert Show, and she's still there, you know, and she is a great bass player. So I know, but still, she is a world-class bass player, and she will have a career after Stephen Colbert Show. You watch, because she is a great bassist. And so yes, I have had a great career, not only as with all these singers. You know, one thing I've talked about is Johnny Bassett, Alberta Adams, Joe Weaver, Stanley Mitchell, Kenny Martin, all these great singers that I've had the pleasure of working with. But also along the way, like I said, Chris Kodish, Keith Kaminsky, Tim Marks, Noah Jackson, India Owens. I've been bringing along many great young musicians in my lifetime. They've come through the ranks of my band. And still to this day, many great musicians come through my band. It's a rite of passage in Detroit to come through and play in one of my bands. I got a call earlier this year from, anybody know who Marcus Elliott is, the saxophone player in Detroit here? Well, okay, you should, because he's an incredible world-class talent. He teaches at Wayne State and at U of M, and he calls me up and says, I have a saxophone player for you, and this kid's been subbing in my band all year. And so, yeah, it's kind of a thing in Detroit. Better call RJ, he'll put you to work, you know. Okay, let's go to one that says Roy Brooks. Roy Brooks was a great drummer who left Detroit in the 50s and 60s. He was in New York City where he recorded and played on classic records with Horace Silver.
Oh, wow.
And he played with Mingus and was considered one of the, real hard bop drummers. And he came back to Detroit where he, was a mentor to many people, and I took some lessons from Roy back in the 70s when I was a young kid. And in the far corner, you see that's me with the curly hair playing a gig with Roy. And this was Roy's, he called this the Aboriginal Percussion Choir. And it was like 35 guys playing congas and marimbas.
Oh, wow.
And there's Roy playing the vibraphone. And he was a very intense man, and I loved him very much. Roy, before he died, he would come to my gigs all the time, and it was very encouraging to me. He'd say, "Rick, you got that blues beat." It was really nice that he would come out to my gigs. I'd see him in the audience, and there he'd be, And if I'd come to his gig, he'd say, "Come up here," and he could play the musical saw. He could put the saw between his knees, and he could play whole melodies. He'd play all blues and all this stuff, and he'd solo, and he'd be on a gig and he'd want to do this, but he'd be the drummer. So I'd come up and I'd play drums while he did that. So it was a great honor, It was just an incredible thing. All right, we've covered a lot here, George. You and I here, bro. Oh. Here's another one of Eddie Bo's. Was Eddie Bo Detroit Band Live? I skipped this picture, but it gives you kind of a picture. You asked if I was playing congas. There you go. That's me in action there with all those guys. And that's playing at the festival I talked about in Lansing, as a matter of fact. Now, that was a great gig. There we are. This is some funky stuff too, boy, let me tell you. So
how about PD9? When did you start that one?
2007. Before we get to that, let me finish, tie up one little odds and end here. Let's go to what says RJ and Larry. Many years ago, I started working with a group called the Jazz Foundation of America.
Okay.
And first with Alberta, and then with Larry Smith. And I go once a month to a nonprofit, generally libraries, where I play a concert for free. It's free to whoever the entity is, but the Jazz Foundation of America pays us to go there. So this was a series that was started by the Jazz Foundation after Katrina came to New Orleans and everybody was out of work. They wanted to put the musicians back to work, so they started a series down there, and it was so successful they started doing it in New York. And then he brought it to Detroit. And I've been running it here in Detroit for close to 20 years now.
Really?
And I go to one library a month. It could be, a school or a church or whatever. But I've been doing this for almost 20 years, one free concert a month. If anybody knows a suitable place that I can come and play a free concert for you, I will bring a 5-piece group out there. There's my guitar player, Oliver Nevels, who I've known since those gigs at the Tap Room in '85. And that's our bassist, Greg Cook, who I've known since, you saw that picture of James O'Donnell and I playing at Captain's Bar in 1978. Greg was playing bass with us back then. And there's me on drums, and that's Larry Smith. And Larry Smith is one of the great jazz saxophone players. He was actually the saxophone player in Roy Brooks's band that I showed earlier, and he toured with Sonny Stitt.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, he was a great bebop eminence, and they called him, his nickname was the Great One. And I played with Larry for years, playing, jazz and library concerts. So just to that's another chapter of my life was doing that. Now, let's get to the PD9. So this is actually the latest version of the PD9. I had the first 15 years of my career was with the Sun Messengers, and at 35 I said, I'm sick of playing these wedding gigs, and I love those guys, but matter of fact, we're doing a 45-year reunion of the Sun Messengers on August 3rd at the Cashew Cafe, and I'm really looking forward to it. But after that, I went and I had all those great blues singers that I played with for the next 15 years, and they all hit 80, 75, 80, and they all checked out, and they left us. Which I was very sad about that. They're gone, and well, it was 2007, and I thought, well, I'm gonna corral James and T-Bone, my old guys from the Sun Messengers, because we can get together and we'll play some of those old swing charts that we had in the Sun Messengers that no one's playing anymore, because the Sun Messengers, they were now playing funk and R&B as the house band of the Pistons, you know, and they weren't playing any of those swing charts anymore. Right. And Rick just gave them to me, and he says, yeah, you're gonna play them, you know, I have them. So he gave me, you know, King Porter Stomp and Big John Special and you know, all the great tunes that we played back in the old days in the Sun Messengers, and they were just languishing in a file box at his house. So I started practicing them up with these guys. Actually, a different version of this group, but these guys, you know, James and T-Bone. These are my oldest pals from the Sun Messengers. I'm still hanging out with, you know, guys I've known for literally 50 years. And so there's James, and there's T-Bone's on the far left, and then that's Goody White's the 30s. I had a jam session at Cliff Bell's. I don't know, how many years ago was that? I can't remember, but a long time ago. I guess Goody's 35, and he was 18 when he came to me at Cliff Bell's. I had a 3-year run of playing every Wednesday at Cliff Bell's. What would that be? That'd be 18 years ago. So about 18 years ago, I started a jam session at Cliff Bell's, and all those guys, these young kids that you see today, the top guys in Detroit, the young guys coming up, Raphael Leifar, Jake Shattuck, Jesse Kramer, Ralph Tope, and Ralph was my guitar player, and Duncan McMillan was my organist, and we had a little house gig up there at Cliff Bell's, and everybody, all the young kids came through. Mark Lipson was the only veteran guy that came and hung out with us, and a great drummer that he is. But yeah, Goody would come through, and that's where I met him. And there he is playing baritone sax with us. Next to him is Chris Tabazinski, who since that picture has lost 90 pounds apparently, and that's quite impressive. And then next to him is Alex Callista. Both of them are just fantastic saxophonists and clarinetists. But Chris is such a great clarinet player. He plays the Elbert system.
Oh, really?
The Elbert system.
Yeah.
Who plays the Elbert system, right?
Yeah.
Alex is so impressed by him playing the clarinet that Alex, he doesn't play the Elbert, he plays the bump system, but he plays very well on clarinet. So I have 2 strong clarinet players in my band, and then there's big fat RJ, and then my excellent drummer Sean Perlmutter. Next to him is the pianist Michael Sikorsky. He's just a fine piano player, a real veteran Detroit drummer. Next to him is our bassist, Trevor Lamb. Yes, I know their names. And then our piano player, our trumpeter Charlie Miller. A lot of people know his dad, Russ Miller, who was a friend of mine for at least 35, 40 years, and a fellow East Side buddy of mine. And then James O'Donnell. There you go. So I've known all my life. And so we started that band in 2007. We've won at least 11 Detroit Music Awards and played in 11 states. And we played a tour of 8 cities in 8 days. In June, we did probably 15 or 16 gigs in June, and we'll probably do 8 or so this month. And yeah, that's it. For a 10-piece band, we do pretty well, you know? Yeah, so that's that group. And then I have 2 other groups with T-Bone. Oh, wait, here, go to the RJ Trio picture, yeah. Here's the trio that I had. That's Ralph Tope, and that's Duncan McMillan, and that's me. There I am, I'm particularly fat in that picture. We made two recordings with that band, and those guys, they were such beautiful cats. We'd play every Wednesday at that gig, and we'd play one set of our music, and then it was a jam session. And after that first break, there would never be a break. There would just be continuous music the rest of the night, because so many musicians would come out and sit in and play. And those 2 guys would come in every week, with a new song each week. So we would do that gig for 50 weeks out of the
Yeah,
year,
yeah.
and we would add 100 songs a year.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, isn't that something else?
Yeah.
That's how inspired they were, you know? Every week they come in with each with a different new tune. So then I have a group of T-Bone, the other one says Paxton Spangler, Septet Dunn. And I saw Mr. Dunn stepped in here for a minute here. That's a group I have with T-Bone, and it's a group where we play South African jazz, music by like Hugh Masekela and I don't know, you know, Abdullah Ibrahim and you know all that kind of stuff, Brotherhood of Breath. And so there's Dan Bennett and Dominic Varenga and David Warmack, and there's me and Phil Hale and Sean and T-Bone, and that's a real good group. We play all these really nice funky African tunes. We have, I only do about 7 or 8 gigs a year with that band, but we have several CDs out that have, I mean, we got great reviews in South Africa for that stuff, you know. Those are really good, it's a really good group. And then go to the one that says T-Bone and R J Dunn, just that one. And this is really my, it's me and T-Bone, and we have a quintet, and we have 3 CDs out with this group. And this is a 5-piece band that plays everything from Fats Waller to Neville Brothers and, you know, funky New Orleans stuff to, you know, standards, you know, Sinatra, whatever.
That's great.
Yeah, and that group plays, you know, 5, 6, 7, 8 times a month. You know, because it's only 5 guys. It's probably couldn't be my busiest group. You know, and it's the same drummer and bass player from Planet D with a great guitar player named Matt LaRusso, and T-Bone and I were dear buddies and dear pals. And that kind of wraps up all my photos. Is anything you want to talk? Any question you have for me now at this point?
Well, I think what we have
Sinnott?
to do is open it up for questions.
Okay. Yeah.
I've got to go, otherwise, do you have a copy of this?
I don't.
I brought it for you, you've got a shout out in it.
Yeah, I actually proofed that thing.
Oh. Anyway, this is yours, and I wanted you to have it.
Yeah, thank you. And you are?
I'm Sally Feed, you don't remember me from way back when you talked at Northville,
Oh.
and you gave a wonderful talk to our Michigan Jazz record collectors.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
Yeah, right, anyway.
That's so kind of you.
I brought this
Thank
in, I
you.
wanted to have
Thank
it.
you. Thank you. Sally Feed. Right, thank you, Sally. I
Question out.
JRC, I remember reading you at the desk.
Yes.
I remember.
Dave has a question.
Do you have any time for other interests?
Yeah, I watch British detective procedurals on streaming TV. I read a lot. I'm mostly biographies. I've read hundreds of jazz biographies, as you might imagine. But I'll read a book about anybody's life interest. I read a book recently about a woman who was Anthony Bourdain's assistant. I've read books by you know, people who were a maitre d'. I read a book by a long haul trucker. You know, an interesting life is an interesting life. So I like to hear personal interest stories by people. So yeah, I like reading true stories, I guess, like that. So but I read a lot. I'm right now reading a book about the life of Will Rogers. And I read, you know, yeah, I like to read. I read a lot. I read some periodicals too. You know, I read Downbeat. You know, I started reading Downbeat as a high school kid.
Yeah.
You know, yeah. Basically, I used to travel a lot, and maybe we'll travel a little bit more again. I don't know. Those are my interests. That's it. I think it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
I like Irish whiskey.
Any other questions out there?
I just enjoyed hearing you talk about all the old bars and the old times, and I realized I probably spent more time in the bars than I knew, because I knew just about everybody you were talking. It's fascinating.
Yeah, there's a lot of time spent out there, huh?
Yeah?
It's not such a bad thing. I hope I didn't bore the young people in the back. I hope I didn't bore the young people in the back.
Not at all.
All right. All right.
Well, thanks for joining us.
Yeah.
RJ, it's been great.
Oh, man. Did I talk the whole time up? Did I go overtime?
No, you're good.
All right.
You're good. Great. Thank you.
Thanks for having me, Will.
Thank
Really,
you
thank
so
you very
much.
much.
Thank you, RJ.
Very interesting.
Thanks for sharing your life with us.